hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the CeMAP Study Podcast, where every single week, me and my best friend Maria get together and we help you guys get CeMAP qualified in a world where it's really hard to get CeMAP qualified and I just couldn't do it. If this is the first ever episode that you tuned into, hello, welcome. It's perfect to have you here. Don't listen to this one though. Stop, go back. There's one that literally says CeMAP 1 start here, and I would recommend that you start there. It's going to give you the basics of how this works, but ultimately, we go through chapters of the CeMAP textbook, and I help people get CeMAP qualified. So if you've never heard of us before, make sure you go to futureinfinance.co.uk. Make sure you check out all of the free stuff that I can help with. Make sure you check out dates for masterclass spaces. As of this coming out, I think my next course availability is May or June. But this is a longer episode than usual because we really jumped into it. So we're not going to fart about. I think we just
get involved.
Yeah. Maria, if you wouldn't mind.
Cue intro music.
Okay, so understanding and satisfying customer needs. I'm going to sit on my hands so I don't mess with the camera again. This is a bit of it's not a weird topic, but a lot of people kind of skip past it because you don't tend to get a huge amount of questions in your exam specific to this direct chapter, but all the other questions you kind of can't answer without understanding this chapter first.
Right, okay.
So people will never be like, I got loads of questions from topic 14, but actually you can't answer half of the other questions in the unit. It's
fundamental to the process.
Exactly. And this is one of the ones where it's fine in CeMAP 1. You can maybe scrape past in CeMAP 1, but when you get CeMAP 2 and 3, if you haven't figured this bit out, you're utterly bollocksed for passing those two exams. So it's all to do with, okay, you have a client, how do we figure out what they need financially? Which, as a mortgage advisor or aspiring mortgage advisor, is a pretty big deal.
Job.
Yeah. So the textbook starts by talking about this idea of somebody's financial life cycle. And when I run the masterclasses, I really like to do this as an exercise because I always, 98% of the time, get a similar answer, which is, what's your first experience of money? Like either age-wise or like, when do you first remember money?
Yeah. I'm trying to think. I used to get pocket money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think probably I went to boarding school.
Yeah.
So we had pocket money given to us on weekends. We had half a day of school on a Saturday.
Yeah.
And Saturday afternoons, we were allowed to go into town.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously spend our money. And we had a routine. We'd go to W.H. Smith and check out the most recent magazines. There was a toy store, and they had like collectible toys, but they were collectibles.
So like Beanie Babies?
No, so they were like, were they? I can't remember the name of the brand, but me and my best friends at school were horsey.
Mm-hmm. That's not a shock even remotely.
I think that's why I'm so funny now, because I was mercilessly teased for being a horse girl. And honestly, after that kind of distraught teenage year cycle, I'm good now. Oh, I've done the camera. So so I used to get, I think it was a tenner.
Yeah, pocket money. That's what I got as well.
We'd do that. Yeah, and then we'd go to a kebab house and get a kebab. And then between us, we'd see if we had enough money left over to get a taxi so we didn't have to walk up the killer hill back to school. So I think that was probably like my first concept of me having my own money and sort of budgeting.
And everybody generally tends to give the same answer. It's either pocket money or it's like Christmas, birthdays, money from grandparents
and a card. Yeah.
That's everybody's first experience. And most people's life cycle financially takes the same kind of route regardless of who you are. There obviously are exceptions.
Yeah, there are differences.
But usually the way that it works is people start off with pocket money. They might be dealing in cash. Generally, I mean, we didn't get bank accounts, so we were like 15, 16, 17.
I think I had one from 10.
All right. Well, now you've thrown it right under the bus.
It was Grandpa. He was like, so that we can put money in for the girls.
Yeah.
To save money for the girls.
Whereas now kids have banking apps. Like you see 11-year-olds going around with banking apps on their phone, which is great.
Cards at school. Did you have the like dinner money card?
Yeah, the preloadable ones.
Yeah, I think that was probably my first experience with
any form of electronic.
Plastic.
Yeah. And then people leave school, or they leave education at least, they might get their first job, which is their first experience of, okay, I'm having to manage money in some way.
Yeah.
Most people at this point are still living with parents. Maybe they're paying rent, maybe they're not. Maybe they've gone off to university, in which case they have a concept of having to pay their way, sort of, but it's still different when you're at uni.
Yeah.
And then at some point, after the education process, that's when people start going, okay, either I want to move out of my parents' house, or I want my first car, or I want to go on my first lads holiday. Like, something financial tends to happen around that time, whether it's a car, whether it's moving house, whether it's going on a holiday.
Yeah.
At that point, we might touch on credit for the first time. So,
okay, yeah.
When you're 18, generally you get a credit card through the post with your name on. You're like, congratulations. That's
Being pre-approved.
That's how I got completely trapped and getting into loads of debt. It's because they were like, just have credit cards. And I was like, I will take those credit cards. Well, congratulations, you avoided.
I feel left out. Oh. Another child.
You still don't have a credit card.
Don't have a fucking credit card.
So, debt at that point tends to be short term. It might be credit card debt, in which case spend responsibly. It might be a car on finance. It might be a mobile phone bill. Like, all of those start there, but all of those are short term. They either run over like 12 months, 24 months. Car finance, I think the max you can get it over is 5 years.
Yeah.
And then the next logical stage, and I say this, the next most common stage would be longer term debt, like mortgages.
Yeah.
After a mortgage, or around the mortgage time, is also when people generally tend to have kids. So their financial needs change again, because all of a sudden they have to be better protected, which we will come on to in a little bit. We're not going to do too much on protection in this topic, but that's another reflection on, okay, how have my financial circumstances changed?
Yeah.
Because if I die tomorrow, I have a £500,000 house that's everyone's going to have to sell to pay for, because they can't pay for it themselves.
2 kids and a husband, and yeah.
But then it shifts again when kids start to get a little bit older. People get a little bit older in their jobs, meaning they've got more experience, meaning they earn more money.
Yeah.
Meaning either they get into more debt because they want the lavish lifestyle, or their debts start to whittle down as they pay off their mortgage, they pay off their car finance.
Childcare's not as expensive because
exactly.
You can work a tin opener, you can leave them alone.
Exactly. You're paying into your pension more because you're thinking more about the fact that one day you are going to be too old to work because your knees and your back hurt. And then as you reach retirement, everything gets thrown up in the air again, because usually by that point people don't have a mortgage. People's kids have moved out and are now no longer financially dependent on them.
Then you're looking at funeral costs, legacy for kids and grandkids. It's
Making
a completely different landscape than when you first bought your house, first got your mortgage.
And that's it. And one thing that people don't understand with CeMAP, especially when we talk about the protection stuff, is that when you take out some sort of life insurance product, whatever that is, it's never static. So people go, well, fucking hell, I don't want to pay £40 a month every month for the rest of my life. Well, no, you won't, because your financial requirements from a protection perspective now are wildly different to what they'll be in 10 years.
Even 3 or 4 years. Like, for example, 3 or 4 years, you might go from 0 kids to 5 kids.
Exactly. And the amount of people that I speak to who are like, oh yeah, I think I took life insurance out when I got a mortgage, but I'm not super sure. And then you go, okay, how much has changed since then? And they'll be like, well, I've got a divorce, I've had another 2 kids, like, blah, blah, blah. And I'll be like, cool, you need an insurance review. But that's the idea. That's the first bit of the textbook, is talking about, okay, somebody's life cycle financially changes. And at every changing point, you would look at their circumstances different. And as a mortgage advisor, and very often a protection advisor, because the two go hand in hand, you will look at their circumstances and go, okay, what suits the right now, long term? But then you're going to redo that in like 2, 3 or 5 years. And go, okay, what suits them long term right now? It'll be different.
Exactly.
So understanding that is really important. And that brings us to the first most common exam question-y bit for this topic, which is to do with something called a fact find.
Oh, love a good fact find.
I know you've heard this before, Maria, so what do you know about fact find?
It's basically establishing your client's needs based off of what their current circumstances are. So it's not about like, what do you like to watch in the evening when you have a glass of red wine? It's like, what does your spending look like? Do you have Amazon, Paramount, Sky? When you sit down in the evening, have you got £150 worth of expenditure on streaming services to watch? Do you like to go out? Do you like to go on holiday?
Yeah.
How much are you spending on your car?
Yeah.
Basically what their financial landscape looks like, so you can better service them.
That is exactly it. It's figuring out your customers. I think the textbook uses the phrase needs and preferences.
Yeah.
And it's not even just financial. So for anybody doing CeMAP or wanting to be a mortgage advisor, the FactFind is your first conversation with the client. It's the first time you sit down with them, whether it's over the phone or in person, and go, okay, what are we dealing with here? Because everybody will be different. You might have somebody buying a new house. They might be a first-time buyer. They might be getting divorced. They might be moving to a bigger house. They might be downsizing. They might be buying a holiday home. Like, the possibilities are endless. But the next step is to go, okay, tell me about you, because that is the applicant. That is the person that you're dealing with, and you need to know everything about them.
Yeah.
You need to know all of their personal details, because ID requirements for lenders is important. You need to know their age, because their age will dictate how long they can have a mortgage for, because you can generally only get a mortgage up until retirement age.
Mm-hmm.
You need to figure out how many kids they've got and how old they are, because if they're paying like £7,000 a month in childcare, that's going to impact their affordability.
Yeah.
Are they married? Does that person want to be on the mortgage application? Does that person have any debts as well? Like, all of that is what comes into the fact find. So personal details is the first one. Name, address, date of birth, immediate family is generally what
so your hard facts.
Oh yes, we're going to come on to hard and soft facts in a second. Don't jump ahead, but well done. It is a hard fact. Employment details is the next big one, and that's massive for mortgages.
Yes.
Because generally speaking, as of right now when we're recording this, which is February 2025, as long as you've been in employment for 3 to 6 months, that's all you need. 3 to 6 months worth of pay slips. You're good to go.
Yeah.
Self-employment, it's more complicated, and actually for CeMAP 1 you don't need to understand how that works, so I'm not even going to cover it in this episode, but it can change literally overnight, so it is important to know what's going on in the market or the environment at the time. That won't come up in CeMAP though. The big one is income and expenditure.
100%.
Because ultimately your income dictates
what you can afford.
Yeah. So the thing about income and expenditure as well is people don't realise very often either how much they earn, or certainly not how much they spend and how much debt they're in.
No, it's crazy, isn't it? Like, if you actually sit, I remember the first time you told me, you were like, when was the last time you like budgeted, put a spreadsheet together? And I was like, I've literally never not once done that in my life. A, because spreadsheets are terrifying, and B, because I don't want to.
And people will be one side of the fence or the other. I fucking love a good spreadsheet. I would sit in a spreadsheet for days.
Let us know which side of the fence. Are you a spreadsheeter or a no spreadsheeter?
And every single time I run a masterclass, somebody will be like, Charlotte, will you send me a budgeting spreadsheet? I should just put it as a downloadable file on the website. So income is important, one, because it will impact your affordability for your house, but it's earned income. Do you have any benefit income? Do you receive any child maintenance payments, which is a bit of a sticky one, which we'll come on to in a different topic. Do you have any rental properties? Yeah. Do you have any pension income? Like, anything classed as earned income can often be considered for a mortgage.
Yeah.
But they have to be long term. So I said child maintenance was a bit of a sticky one. It does depend on the lender. I found some lenders will take child maintenance.
Right.
Some lenders will only take it if the mortgage term is for a shorter period of time than when the child turns 18, because then they don't get child maintenance anymore. Some lenders won't accept it whatsoever unless it's court ordered. And even if it's court ordered, it's not guaranteed. That's wild. It's just dependent on the lender with child maintenance.
Right, okay.
But generally speaking, it's never a huge amount of money anyway, so it doesn't impact.
Yeah.
Expenditure is the big one. So how much debt are you in? And people never know the fucking answer to that question. They think they do, they don't.
They don't.
So it's things like credit card debt. Have they paid off all their credit card debt? Because if they haven't, that's a bit of a red flag.
Okay.
Car finance is the biggest one, because every single person says, yeah, but they just told me at the BMW dealership that if I don't want the car anymore, I can take it back and that's it. I'm not in debt anymore. So technically it's not a debt.
Oh boy.
It's true. Very often you can take the car back. You will probably be in negative equity if you do that. Not always, but very often.
Yeah.
Car finance is the biggest impactor for how much you can afford on a mortgage.
Shut up.
So I've seen some mortgage applications where you'll deal with a client and they'll give you their income and you'll think, oh yeah, they're good for about £250,000. Maybe they've got a £60,000 BMW on finance, but it's impacted their affordability by £100,000. It's not always, but I've seen it happen with quite a few clients before. And what they've ended up doing is taking the car back, paying off the debt, buying a banger to drive around in for 6 months. while they get the mortgage.
Can get the mortgage and then get in the car afterwards.
Yeah, because it affects their affordability sometimes by £100,000.
That's absolutely crazy.
And when you say to people, would you rather have your BMW or would you rather have an extra £100,000 to put toward a house? For most people, it's a no-brainer. But the one thing I would say to anybody is always make sure to tell your customers not to take out fucking car finance whilst they're going through their mortgage application, because I've seen that happen as well. They think, oh, this new build property, I'll get a Tesla and finance it, it'll look well nice on the drive.
Mate.
Then the mortgage gets declined.
But do you think that that's part of it? Oh, you've done it.
It's me, sorry. You're just going to have to lean into this, guys. If you're watching this on YouTube, if you're listening to this on Spotify, you've got no idea what's going on.
I've completely lost my train of thought. It's
car finance.
Do you think that that's partly because there's a gap in education?
Yes, but also nobody talks, like, it is that there's a gap in education, but it doesn't make any sense. If you've got a £60,000 BMW, I understand that your affordability would be impacted by £60,000. That makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't understand why with car finance specifically I've seen the discrepancy.
Yeah.
It doesn't always happen, can happen. With income and expenditure, credit scores obviously is a really big one as well.
Oh, yeah.
Because your credit score will dictate whether or not you can get a mortgage.
Everything.
Yeah. So I'm actually probably going to link some information in the show notes about credit scores, both for people personally where they can go to check their credit scores, but also when you're a mortgage advisor, the best thing that you can do for your client. Now, this isn't in the CeMAP textbook, so this is not official LIBF guidance, but I tell all of my students to do this, and all of them come back 6 months later, and they're like, Charlotte, out of everything that you told me, this was the golden nugget. And I'm like, great. Of all of those hours of teaching, this was the one thing that they took away. And it's something called Check My File.
Yeah.
We were talking about this the other day.
The other day in the car, yeah.
They do not sponsor this podcast, although if they would like to, they could absolutely get in touch. But the idea is, Check My File is probably the only credit referencing agency that I'm aware of that checks TransUnion, Experian and Equifax, which are the 3 credit referencing agencies that lenders will use when they check.
Okay, so it will give you results from all of those.
So what you can do if you're a mortgage advisor is say to your client, I will give you a link. By the way, Check My File offer kickbacks, so you can set up them to get a kickback from it. I will give you a link. You can download your credit file for free for 14 days. It's one of those where you do have to put your bank details in, and I think they charge you £15 a month if you forget to cancel it.
Yeah.
So, but the first 14 days are free, and you literally need it for 30 seconds to download your credit file, then you can cancel it. Once you've downloaded your credit file, you can send that over to your mortgage advisor. It will give them a 5-year breakdown of every single month of your credit for the last 5 years for all 3 credit referencing agencies.
I mean, that's great, but also fucking terrifying.
And what it will do, because you might check it with Experian, and it'll be like, yeah, grand. You might check it with TransUnion, and they had a different address for you that had a CCJ because of a parking ticket that you didn't pay.
So it can vary.
Yeah, so it's worth checking specifically with Check My File so that you can get access to all 3. I pay for it every month, and that's just because I'm a nerd and I'm trying to improve my credit score.
Oh my God.
Yeah, leave me alone. But
I mean, this is a judgment-free zone, but that's like...
Listen, do I lie awake and check my credit file at 2:00 in the morning? Yes, I do. What's your problem?
I love you so much. That's incredible.
So,
okay, sorry, yes.
I will link it in the show notes. It's called Check My File. You can check your own credit score. If you are going into mortgage advice on a self-employed basis, you can set up a referral scheme with them. And I think it's for every sign-up or everybody that checks their credit score through your referral code. I think you get a tenner. So it's not...
That's decent.
It's not mega money, but if you're getting 10 clients over the line a month that check it, it's £100 a month better off in your pocket.
Better than a kick in the dick, isn't it?
Exactly. So that's the fact find. The only other thing we haven't spoken about is assets. So do you have any assets? One thing a lot of mortgage advisors can forget to ask is this for a second home or a first home? Because if you haven't asked, do you already have a mortgage? Funnily enough, that will impact their affordability
That's
if they do.
Surprising.
So that's another one. Like, that's not the only type of asset, but are they earning an income from any, trusts or investments, stocks and shares, whatever it is? Do they have any assets? What do they look like? Are they going to use them to pay off their mortgage in the future? In which case, do they want an interest-only mortgage? Like, there's a lot.
So we're
going on
talking
there.
investment assets, not like your fucking Tesla.
Not you Pokemon collectible cards. Yeah, no, investment assets.
Investment
as
assets.
Opposed to, I don't even know what you would call alternative assets. I guess. But yeah,
your stamp collection.
Your stamp collection. I still stick with Pokemon cards. My Green Day poster collection. Leave me alone. And that brings us nicely on to soft and hard facts, which I know is going to give you the giggles because it always does.
Always does.
This will come up in everybody's CeMAP 1 exam. So it's really important that you guys know the difference between these two. Maria, what do you know? You know?
I'm going to say hard facts are things like address, salary.
Yeah.
Soft facts, I want to be like, do you like to have 3 holidays a year or just 2?
Actually, that's a really good way of explaining it. So the difference between a hard and a soft fact is one can change and one can't.
Yeah.
But that's probably not even the best way of describing it, because people go, yeah, but Charlotte, you can move house, therefore your address, which is a hard fact, does change.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, okay, but on the day that I ask you a question, the hard fact is a hard fact. Where do you live right now? There's only one correct answer to that, unless you don't have a fixed abode.
I suppose hard facts have a definitive answer. Soft facts are preference.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly it. So if I said to you, Maria, how much money do you have in your bank account? Is that a hard or a soft fact?
That's a hard fact.
Cool. What if I said to you, Maria, at what age do you want to retire?
That's a soft fact because it will change.
Because it might change. That's exactly it. So
because honestly, tomorrow.
That's it. Do you want to get married? Like, that answer can change depending on the point at which you're in your cycle every month.
Yeah, exactly.
It's completely
right now,
on thoughts and feelings, and that's the other way of thinking about it.
Okay, yeah.
A hard fact is a fact. A soft fact is more to do with thoughts and feelings.
Yeah.
So if I said to you, how much deposit do you have to put down on a house? That's a hard fact. But if I said to you, how would you feel if your interest rate went up and down every month?
That's a soft fact.
Yeah.
But it's still just as important.
Exactly. Everybody will get questions on this in their CeMAP 1 exam. I absolutely guarantee you will get at least one on the difference between a hard and a soft fact.
Yeah.
And I think we've boxed that off pretty well.
Perfect.
And another thing everybody will probably get a question on is to do with something called, well, there's 2 phrases and they're different. One is called a customer's attitude to risk.
Uh-huh.
And another one is a customer's capacity for loss. And they sound kind of similar.
Okay.
So a client's attitude to risk is, I like to think of it, we've paused the camera again.
I didn't even move.
Yeah, you didn't, hang on. No, it doesn't know what it's doing now.
On your own, mate.
Is it moving? There we go. A customer's attitude to risk is to do with, how would you feel if interest rates changed is probably the best one to go with. So for me, because I've been in a lot of debt before, if I was going to get a mortgage product right now, I'd fix into something. And I know that interest rates are kind of high. So I know that there is a risk that if I tie into a 5.5% interest rate, if interest rates drop next week,
you're going to be overpaying.
I'll overpay for like 3 or 5 years. But my attitude to risk is, or risk I guess my risk tolerance, is pretty low. Whereas a lot of people will be like, I'll take an interest-only mortgage with a really risky investment to save some money. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that as long as they're getting the right kind of advice with it.
It's literally preference.
Mm-hmm.
It's literally preference.
Yeah, exactly. So most people that I speak to at the minute, they are fixing in just because of interest rates being a clusterfuck, but not everybody will feel the same way.
I suppose that's also heavily impacted by the second part, which is your tolerance for loss.
That's it.
So if you're absolutely fucking loaded, you probably have a slightly more relaxed approach than, or if you've always had money or a buffer, or you've never been in your position where you've been in a shitload of debt and you're worried all the fucking time about buying groceries and filling your car up, your tolerance is probably much higher.
And that's something I found with a lot of my students is, if I've had students that have been in debt in the past, their risk tolerance is lower than those who've either never been in debt or they just got a really good financial education from their parents. Like every so often I have students come in and they're like sorted with everything. Like they've got their emergency fund and it's 6 months worth of their income. They've got, their pension is sorted and they're overpaying into it. And that's because their parents were financial advisors and they're like, okay, you do this, this and this. And that's great. Their attitude to risk is generally a lot higher than somebody who hasn't.
Yeah.
So there's no right or wrong answer. It is always down to personal preference. But for a mortgage advisor, if you don't figure out what your client's attitude to risk is, there's a very good chance you'll set them up with the wrong type of mortgage product. And if you do that, you fuck them over royally.
Yeah.
That's attitude to risk. Capacity for loss is slightly different.
Mm-hmm.
So capacity for loss is all to do with how would you feel if this investment fell? So it's not the same as an attitude to risk, because risk really, if you think about interest rates and rates going up and down, that's risk. Capacity for loss is how do you feel if you lost all of this money?
So it's the impact of loss.
Your risky decision.
Yeah. So so your attitude is it will be grand.
Yeah.
But let's say you've lost it.
Mm-hmm.
Now how do we actually feel about it?
Yes, and the way that I think about the difference, so I always use the interest rates when I think about attitude to risk.
Yeah.
For capacity for loss, I always think about recommending an investment product to a client.
Okay.
So if you had somebody who said, I just want this money to be safe.
Right.
I don't mind if it doesn't make me a huge amount.
Yeah.
I'd like it to keep up in line
with
inflation.
But I never want to lose it.
But I never want to lose it.
Yeah.
You are not going to tell them to invest in crypto. I mean, you're not going to recommend that anyway, but that's the point. Whereas if you had somebody who was like, do you know what? If this money was thrown into a bucket and set on fire on a Friday night with some tequila, it is what it is. At that point, you go, okay, you've kind of already said goodbye to this money. So we'll put it in a high risk investment because you're not that arsed about it.
Yeah. But if someone turns around and goes, this is my life savings, I cannot lose this.
Mm-hmm.
I, at the very least, must get this back.
Yeah.
You don't put it in a high risk investment.
Exactly. And you'll have people. So, for example, I put into an ISA every month.
Yeah.
My ISA is safe. I know that money is not going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
I can almost guarantee it unless the bank goes bankrupt, which I don't think is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But every month I stick like 30 quid into a cryptocurrency account. That 30 quid I could have spent on coffee. I'm happy with the fact that I'll probably never see that money again.
That's your tolerance.
Bonus. But I'm not going to stick £1,200 a month into a cryptocurrency account. Because if I never see that again,
but you will into your ISA because you know the difference is it's guaranteed.
One is safe, one is not. Exactly. So that's the difference between attitude to risk and capacity for loss. You feel good with that?
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then the last thing we're going to talk about, I reckon, for this topic is something called a vulnerable customer, which I feel like we might have spoken about vulnerable customers before, but I've lost track of which episodes correlate to what now. So what do you understand about vulnerable customers?
A lot. So it's anybody that they widened I'm really sorry, that's my dog.
Through the wall.
That is my puppy. They broaden the definition, widen the definition. I don't know what fucking word it is. To encompass. So previously, vulnerable customers were exactly what you think: people who are older, people who have disabilities that mean that they are more at risk than somebody who doesn't have that.
Yeah.
They also stretched it to, especially with the financial services, didn't they? Stretch it to include anybody who doesn't have a financial education, somebody who doesn't have knowledge of finances or is in a poor economic position, because they are more likely to make poor decisions. Yeah,
so that last one is it's a little bit of a grey area, but you're right. So vulnerable customers are defined as anybody who could end up being detrimented by a financial service because either they're going through some shit, like they're going through a divorce, they've just lost a loved one, they've just lost their job, they're in a monstrous amount of debt.
Yeah.
It's anything that impacts their decision making. That's how the textbook defines it. So that's one category of people who are just struggling right now. The other category of people are people who don't have a great financial understanding.
Yeah.
There are people who can't read or write, or their numeracy skills are massively detrimented.
Yeah.
There are also people who aren't up to speed with things enough to make decisions. Grandparents.
But also, if you think about it, so if we weren't doing this, right? Mm-hmm. So take, for instance, people of like our mother's generation, our mothers or even our grandmothers, when they were in their 40s, the standard was you got married to a man, you had babies, the man dealt with everything. He was earning you probably weren't even on a mortgage.
Yep.
So in that, it's done it again. So in that scenario,
you have to wait for it to flash.
I wish someone would wait.
I got it.
Is it you? It's you.
There we
I'm
go.
blaming you. So yeah, it's in thinking about what people that don't have a financial education, it doesn't just mean people that are economically detrimented or haven't had exposure to it. It's like, well, you've been a stay-at-home mum for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
You've never had to think about the mortgage. You've never had to think about how all of this works. Suddenly you're going through a divorce. You've got 2 kids.
Yeah.
You have no exposure to it. You don't know what you're doing, but you're going to have to now get a mortgage. You've got no fucking idea which way's up.
Nope. And that's it. That's vulnerability is important under FCA guidance because there are so many people out there who don't know what they're doing when it comes to their finances.
And it's so
easy to get into debt.
To get into a hell of a lot of debt without even trying.
Mm-hmm. All that you really need to know about vulnerable customers for CeMAP 1 is who would be classed as a vulnerable customer. So
and that's integral to your role because you will have to identify them. Yeah,
and what will happen is wherever you end up working, you will have training on, okay, this is how you deal with a vulnerable customer. Every company will do it slightly different, but they'll all follow some general FCA guidance.
Yeah.
But the idea is anybody consolidating debt, so they're in a lot of debt that they're trying to tie into their mortgage.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody who's recently gone through something like a bereavement, a job loss, they're going through a separation.
Yeah.
Maybe they've just come out of prison. Elderly people.
Mm-hmm.
Something called a right to buy customer are classed as vulnerable customers. If you've never heard of this before, the right to buy scheme is where somebody can buy their council house.
Yes.
And they get a discount on it, basically. Yeah. That's all you really need to know for CeMAP 1, but that's the most common one that comes up in people's CeMAP 1 exams for vulnerable customers.
Interesting.
Which one of these would be a vulnerable customer? Usually,
they'll give you a list.
They'll give you a list. You have to find the odd one out. Usually, it's right to buy customer or an equity release customer.
Yeah.
Which are the elderly clients. We'll do another episode on equity release, but older clients who are selling their homes in exchange for cash.
Yeah.
They don't own their homes anymore. When they die, the provider owns it.
Yeah.
They are all the categories of vulnerable customers that you need to know about.
Yeah. So just double check the textbook because it does give you
an indicative list.
Yeah. A list, and they will be the ones that it draws from on the exam.
Exactly. And I think we're over time. I think that's about it for this week's episode.
Was this a monster episode?
A little bit, yeah.
Felt like a marathon.
Yeah, it did. Marathon, not race. Marathon. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. If you have listened to this and you've learned some stuff and you've enjoyed it, please make sure you leave us a review. If it's not 5 stars, don't leave us a review because we're not interested in that kind of negativity. But for all of you guys that have reached out and have been like, Charlotte, the podcast helped so much. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. We will, I guess, just catch you guys next week.
Yeah, next episode. Tune in.
All right.
Cue outro music.